Today we're going to talk about Texas's law banning abortions after 6 weeks and the Supreme Court's decision to allow that law to stand. And I interviewed two state representatives from Texas, Gina Hinojosa, where we discussed the legal implications of this new law, and Ina Minjarez, where we discussed the political implications. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. In a move that I didn't see coming but probably should have, the Supreme Court has functionally gutted Roe, opting to allow SB 8, which is the Texas law banning abortion in the state after 6 weeks, to stand. And there's some dispute between whether this actually guts Roe, considering the court didn't rule on the actual merits. But the practical effect here, that abortion will be outlawed before most women even know they're pregnant, is that Roe v. Wade, which affords women a constitutional right to access to a safe and legal abortion, is now gone. So as a result of this law, there's basically a vigilante system in Texas where private citizens are empowered to police the ban themselves. And so anyone can file a lawsuit against anyone else who's aided someone in getting an abortion. And that's obviously with the hope for a $10,000 payoff. And so we're basically going to have a system where you have private citizens ratting other people out. Like, you know what's so crazy about this? This law was passed by the same party that fearmongers on a literal daily basis about the other side being communists. And yet now, in Texas, you've got neighbors pitted against neighbors ratting them out to the state for a monetary reward. Like, sounds a hell of a lot more like Soviet Russia than anything the so-called communist Democrats have ever introduced. Like, for all their flaws, you gotta admire the right's ability to project. Truly second to none. And you gotta love, too, that this is coming from, of all places, Texas. Like, don't tread on me, except when the state encourages private citizens to rat out their neighbors based on their reproductive health for a cash bounty. Don't tread on me, except when I want to sue Michigan to undo their election results because they didn't vote the way that we wanted them to vote. Texas Republicans don't care about individual freedom. They care about imposing their own agenda and shoving it down your throat, wrapped in a facade of individual freedom. And what's especially insidious about this law is that the timing is deliberate. Like, we are in the summer of an off year in a midterm cycle that was scientifically engineered to occur when not only the least amount of people are paying attention, but also when the least amount could be done about it. Conservatives, from the state legislators who introduced and passed this law, to the litigants in this lawsuit, to the Supreme Court justices who allowed it to stand, all did so knowing that it would have the least ramifications if it happened now. Or that by the time it does come to cast any ballots, you'll already have long forgotten about this. Like, this law and the subsequent Supreme Court decision aren't just draconian in their own right, but the politics surrounding it make it all the worse. Now, as for the issue of abortion itself, where you stand on this issue doesn't really matter, because what everyone on the right seems to be forgetting is that we have a separation of church and state in this country. That concept is so important that the separation of church and state is right there in the very first clause of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, the Establishment Clause. So look, if you want to live your life based on your religion, go right ahead. But having freedom of religion means that while you're free to practice any religion you want, you don't get to impose your religious beliefs on anyone else. And by the way, we have politicians on the left who are personally pro-life but politically pro-choice. And I know that conservatives like to try and call them out as if it's some irreconcilable difference, but it's not. The fact that someone's able to separate their personal beliefs and their political positions isn't some sign of moral weakness, it's a sign of strength. It shows, first of all, that they understand that we do have a separation of church and state. It shows that one person's religious convictions shouldn't dictate how you govern on behalf of tens of millions of people who might not share your personal religious beliefs. And finally, it shows that America is based on freedom. And the same way that you have the choice to practice whatever religion you want, or no religion at all, you also have the choice to get an abortion or not. You might not agree with abortion, and that's fine. Don't get one. Conservatives love to crow about how this is a free country. That doesn't only mean free on the issues that are convenient for them. The fact is that if Republicans really cared about babies, they'd invest in early education. They'd invest in universal pre-K. They'd invest in childcare. They'd invest in the Children's Health Insurance Program. They'd invest in SNAP, where nearly half of the recipients are children. They'd invest in Medicaid, where, again, half of the recipients are children. They'd invest in COVID vaccines, since Texas itself is the nation's leader in child deaths from COVID. They'd focus on any of that. They'd focus on what's happening once they're actually born and not just a fetus. But they don't care because they're not interested in solving problems for people. They're just interested in virtue signaling about the unborn. Why? Because it's convenient. because they don't pose any problems, because they don't cost money, because they're not problematic. They're not homeless, they're not addicted, they're not migrants, they're not poor, they're not women, they're not former felons, they're not mentally ill, they're not liberals, they're not atheists. They don't have any of the baggage of actual people, because if they did, Republicans wouldn't care about them. Just like they don't care about any of those groups that I just mentioned. Once the unborn are born, they're no longer this convenient talking point. There are humans with actual problems and costs and opposing viewpoints, and Republicans aren't interested in helping any of those people. So instead, they've decided that their constituency is the unborn, who luckily won't challenge their views on income inequality and making the rich pay their fair share and equality for women and the LGBT community and denying the dangers of climate change and on, which is pretty damn convenient, especially in a world where the majority of people who actually are born oppose Republican positions on those issues. Like, not for nothing, but Republicans might have a little more credibility on the issue of caring about life if they gave even two shits about people once they exit the womb. And look, the fact that all of this is even happening is a testament to just how far off the cliff the Republican Party has gone. Because remember, 70% of Americans don't want Roe overturned. 70%. And that includes 68% of Catholics. And yet, the fact that Republicans are doing this anyway is as clear an indication as you can get that this party isn't accountable to anyone. Like, forget the majority of Americans, even the minority of Americans. This party is kowtowing to only the fringes of their base. And the only reason they're able to do it is because they're insulated from accountability thanks to things like partisan gerrymanders and voter suppression techniques. When you aren't accountable to the actual electorate, you don't have to represent the actual electorate. And because most of the people in power are vying for national positions, like I assume Greg Abbott is, then your top priority becomes pandering to Sean Hannity's audience of far-right lunatics. So at this point, here's what needs to happen. Knowing that Republicans across the US will now look at Texas's abortion law and replicate it in their own state, something that's already happening in Florida and that South Dakota's governor has already promised will happen there, Democrats can either eliminate the filibuster and lower the threshold to pass legislation from 60 votes to 50 votes, which we have, and finally pass legislation codifying Roe, or we can protect some arcane Senate procedural tool and allow women's right to an abortion in this country vanish. Those are the options. Like, the fact that we have quite literally the numbers right now to eliminate the filibuster, and yet thanks to just a couple of centrists, thanks to Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, we choose not to, is what's allowing these vile laws to get passed in the first place. Having a solution in front of you and yet choosing to do nothing renders you just as complicit as the people passing these laws. Like, Kyrsten Sinema keeps digging in her heels and warning about how bad things would get if the filibuster was gone. Right. Just think about how bad it could be without the filibuster. Thank God that filibuster's intact, because otherwise things would be pretty bad around here. Like, dear God. And it's not just Congress that has a responsibility here. Businesses, sports teams and leagues, musicians, artists, actors, organizations, everyone who brings a single dollar of revenue into the state has a responsibility to let the Texas GOP know that this isn't acceptable and they won't reward a state that traffics in stripping women of their bodily autonomy in 2021. Silence isn't an option here. You don't get to stay neutral on this issue. You can either oppose it and you'll let it be known, or your silence will speak for you. And consumers should pay really fucking close attention here, because our money talks too. But aside from Congress, aside from the private sector, we have a role to play too. It's on us to turn out in large enough numbers that Republicans don't get elected in the first place. It's up to us to deliver enough of a repudiation at the ballot box that these Republicans will be well aware of the consequences of even touching a law like SB 8. And I know it's not easy. I know we're contending with partisan gerrymanders and long lines and no drop boxes and getting kicked off of voter rolls, but that doesn't mean we should give up. So pick one person who's not registered and help get them registered as an action item. Do your small part. If you're looking for organizations that focus solely on voter outreach and voter registration, I have a fund called the Don't Be a Mitch Fund, where I'm raising money for key organizations in 9 states, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, and Arizona. And their job is to get people registered and get people engaged, and knowing the danger of allowing Republicans to get elected, investing in approaches like these and doing it early is going to be essential. If you want to donate, the link is in the post description, or you can go to don'tbeamitch.com, where everything is done securely through ActBlue, and 100% of your donation goes directly to these groups. But it doesn't have to be that fund. It can be any organization that you'd like. The point is doing something. So look, I get that this situation may seem scary and hopeless and exhausting. I get it if you feel like you want to give up. But the right wants nothing more than for you to feel that way. So don't reward them for their horrific behavior by giving them exactly what they want. This is a fight worth having, and it's a fight that we can and will win if we all stay focused and we all do our part. One quick note, if you live in California, we are getting down to the wire. The leading candidate on the right, Larry Elder, has promised to appoint a Republican to Dianne Feinstein's seat if for any reason it should become vacant. So please, do not let our hard work over these last few years be for nothing. If you've received your ballot in the mail, vote no on question 1 and put it right back in the mailbox or a drop box. Or you can go and vote in person either early or on Election Day, which is September 14th. To watch both of my interviews this week from the 2 Texas state representatives, both of whom are on the front lines of this fight, not only as women in the state of Texas, but Democrats in the state legislature where laws like SB 8 are originating, check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel.